Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're good to go.
Okay, thank you for joining us, Pearls of Living, our Pearls of Wisdom series. Remember last time we talked about Black history. We had June Lange with us, and guess what? She's back again tonight. But tonight we're going to be talking about women history, and for instance, well, mainly our Black women. I'll say it like that. So I thought we could start off tonight with a word of prayer. If Isha will lead us in that prayer, and then we'll jump right in.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for this wonderful day that you have blessed us with, a day that we have never seen before, but you poured out your grace, mercy, and love in order for us to be at this moment, at this time. And we thank you for being in the midst as we gather together and talk about the women that you have led, guided, and protected throughout this world, throughout history. And we worship and honor you. And we thank you for the wisdom and the knowledge that will be poured out amongst us. And we pray that your word will go globally and that people will seek you and see your face and be saved. In the name of Jesus, we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Now, we had this event scheduled before the event we got going on at the church now. And that was the way we were going to cancel it. So, but I do have to do an opening message, not a message, an opening little talk at 7 o'clock. And so, but we're not going to end the session before 7 o'clock. We're going to, at that time, we're going to transition probably at 6:30. So we'll let you know when we get to that time, though. But Judge, thank you.
Thank you,
I think
Judge.
at 3 o'clock the other morning, you sent me a message. My wife said, is it actually at 3? She did it at 3 a.m. I said, yeah, at 3 a.m. So
Yeah, the Lord woke me up.
I woke you up. That's why I say it was truly words of wisdom, man. So thank you so much for doing that, for helping me to prepare for this moment tonight. God got it. So
Yeah.
Yes.
and what this is, it's supposed to be a time of peace and a time of prayer and a time of just calming everybody. But you know me, I may holler one time. I don't know. Anyway, we got more right now than anything. We got press everywhere, and they when you emailed me the other morning, they was calling me then about views and all that stuff. I mean, it's just been unreal. But anyway, I want to start off tonight by honoring the women in my life. First of all, my mother. I can't say enough. My mother was really, she actually did the first protest that I was a part of. She walked out of the field with they promised to pay us one thing, and my mama said, let's go. Because they decided they were gonna pay us what they said. And I was like a 9-year-old boy walking out the field behind my mother. We marching. And the bottom line is my mama really saved my life. So I want to thank God for her and all the things she meant to me in my life when everybody else had given up on me and said that I wouldn't be anything, said that I wouldn't make it. My mama never gave up on me. She never gave up on me. And on the other hand, my wife of 44 years, I honor her tonight. It'll soon be 45 years. We start the 1st of May, we start celebrating. We celebrate for a whole month. And certainly we're going to take a lot of time that we can just look at each other, because we're going to be looking at each other the rest of our lives. So we might well go ahead and get used to what we look like at almost 65. So the bottom line is we've been together 44 years, and she has, actually been together over 50 years.
Yeah.
Because we met at 9 years old, and we knew at 9 years old that we were going to one day be together. So thank God for her. And the main thing about it, she has stuck with me. Well, she's the mother of my children. I got some lovely children, and she's the mother. And she has stuck with me the entire time, through the good, the bad, and the ugly. when I didn't deserve even a chance to even be at the house. She didn't run me off. She let me stay. And at the times when I put her through all kind of stuff in the ministry, like going to somebody's house to eat, and the food wasn't good, and but I made her and the children eat anyway. And I said, put mine in the to-go box. So she put up me through. So I want to certainly thank God for her, and I can't say enough about her. So, is there any other man want to represent you? Talk about your woman tonight before we jump right in.
Well, thank you, Pastor Russell. It does bring back remembrances of how we were taught how to act when we go over other folks' house. My mom told me we go over, I'm feeding you now, and when we get over there, you better not ask for nothing. And invariably, we would get to company's house, and they, and I was just a little kid, so they said, "You want some cake?" And I'd say, "Mm-hmm." And I would get chastised once we got back home. I told you not to ask for nothing, but anyway, yeah, we were disciplined by our moms. They were the matriarchs of our homes. And if I ever tried to get relief from dad and ask him for permission for something, he would invariably say, "Go ask your mama." So thank you, sir, for that recall. It does sound familiar in my household as well.
Wonderful. Now we do have some wonderful women, I want to say, that's a part of this Pearls of Living. A daughter, and well, 3 daughters. I don't like to use the word daughter-in-law. I just say my daughters. And I thank God for you all. You all are a wonderful addition to the family and all we're doing and all we're going to do in the future. So I honor you tonight as women in history. You are going to go down in history for what we are doing and what we're about to do going forward. So thank God for you all. Judge, I had a chance. I did your mother's eulogy, and I read the other night. I was reading things the other night, and as I was reading, you had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful mother. And if you just take time and just tell us about this wonderful person of influence in your life. Just you started with that, then that's a good start.
Well, I was very, very blessed to be born into the family I was born in. My mother was born in Arkansas, and her family lived on a farm. They were tenant farmers, and then they had their own farm. And she had, I think it's 5 other brothers and sisters. So my mother was kind of in the middle. My mother's father died when she was about 3 years old. That story is still a thread in terms of my legacy. I don't have details on my biological grandfather, but my mother's mother, my grandmother, remarried, and that husband treated all the children, his own and the so-called stepchildren, like his own. So that was the grandfather that I had growing up. And the grandfather was a very, very light-skinned Black man. And my mother would tell me when they would travel in the South that the authorities would try to separate him from his children and his family because of racial segregation. And so he was a person who worked for rights, but he brought his wife along. So he wasn't off working for civil rights by himself. Many times they went together. My mother talked about how my grandmother put on chaps and rode a horse during the night to these secret meetings that the the tenant farmers would have so that the, white authorities wouldn't know what they were doing. And so she put on those leather riding pants to ride through the forest and get to the meetings and get back home. So my mother grew up with a sense of resistance to the oppression that she was seeing every day. She told me that her own ancestors, through her mother's side, had arrived in Arkansas by escaping slavery, with the light-skinned one pretending to be the master and the dark-skinned one pretending to be the slave. And there was something about Arkansas that was more tolerant than Texas and the other places where the family was. So they settled in Arkansas, some near the Ozarks and some other places in terms of my grandmother's family. So this history was there for my mother. And one of her cousins became the first Black judge in Colorado. So we always had this inspiration in the family of somebody being a judge. Other relatives became attorneys or teachers. And so there is always a sense of striving. But my mother left the South very young during the lead up to World War II, when the nation was very, very unsettled. And she and my dad eloped and went to Minnesota, where my father had relatives. And so they came to Minnesota and started a family, and were first going to Bethesda Baptist Church. So I enjoyed the church picnics and all the wonderful collegiality of growing up in a Black community that cared. And so my mom and my dad, they found a house in South Minneapolis, and St. Peter's AME Church was moving only a couple blocks away in South Minneapolis, and they helped build the church and became really committed members. And so my mother made the church our social life. So she didn't go to clubs, she didn't belong to clubs, and she didn't have people drop in for coffee. So one day I asked her, I said, well, why don't you belong to so-and-so club? And she said, girl, do you know what they do? At the end of the night, they all throw their keys into a hat, and everybody picks a key. So I said, oh, is that why so-and-so looks like so-and-so? And she said, yes. So when I needed to know, she would give me these bits of wisdom. She also worked for Hubert Humphrey. She knew Mr. Cassius, Cecil Newman, all their phone numbers, who to call for help, because remember, there was no public defender, there was no really anything to help Black people. So you had to have your leadership. So we had a Black doctor that we went to that passed the medical practice down one generation after another, named Dr. Brown. So we learned to be able to go to the doctor, seek medical care, get immunizations, talk as long as we wanted to the doctor about anything, politics, our health, anything. So it made going to the doctor a different experience than many people have had in terms of in and out and nobody listening to them as a whole person. We didn't have that kind of experience. And so my mother, her gift was to be able to talk to people on the phone. And so she had a list of people at the church. For over 40 years, she would call to see how people were doing. It was called being a class leader. So she would call almost the entire membership to check in, or a designated number, depending on what the system was over the years, to check in on people and converse with them, and to remember from one time to the next what they talked about. So it was a continuous relationship that she had with people, especially people who were going through hardships or prolonged illness. And these are things she wouldn't even talk to me about. She kept people's confidence. And so that was something that I learned early and respected in terms of compartmentalizing information, keeping people's confidence, but also helping. So not jumping in the hole without the ladder, bringing the ladder to help people so that you can help them get resources and direct people to the places where they needed help. My mother enjoyed travel. She traveled with us to Africa. She traveled with us to both Kenya and South Africa. And then she and my dad, after we were up and out of the house, they went everywhere. But when I was growing up, I didn't know what a vacation was because every summer we went south to visit relatives. So I didn't know folks had a vacation where they went to a hotel. I didn't know anything about that. I just knew we would drive for 23 hours with a bare stop and never going to a restaurant until we got to our family. And the custom of my mother was whenever she visited family, buy groceries before you hit the door, because you're coming in somebody else's house with 4 people and you're going to stay there for 2 weeks and you're going to be eating out of their refrigerator. So bring a load of groceries so that when you hit the door, your children will feel comfortable eating, you'll feel comfortable eating, and you're not being a burden. So we were always welcome to visit our relatives and to stay in Arkansas and Kansas City. And my mother was one who probably every 6 months went to visit her mother all the time that her mother was alive. So they maintained a close relationship. But my mother knew how to stand up for herself. She knew how to fight in terms of strategy, in terms of working on things. When I was under attack as a judge and the whole town thought I was circling the drain, my mother and her friends got a committee together and fought on my behalf. And God brought us through. No one could figure out. They thought all the doors had been blocked, but God guided my mother to get a group of strong Black women to stand up for me. So my mother was always had our backs, but expected us to do our own thinking. That was the thing she kept emphasizing, not to go on what other people said or be intimidated by gossip.
So, we want to honor all of the women who on the call with us tonight. Thank you all. We honor you. We bless God for you. And you are very special in our lives. And as I look back over my life, I don't know, without women, I don't know. I probably wouldn't be here. Probably wouldn't have made it. So, but thank God. Now, important question, as I said, we want to honor all women, but you are a Black judge. You're retired now, I know, but how did that all come about? And I mean, well, I look at how you, in South Minneapolis, maybe you had a problem when you moved in that house initially, and then the folks wanted to put you out. They didn't want no Black folks in the neighborhood. I know that happened. But then you end up being a judge in Minneapolis. Can you just kind of give us a little snippet of that journey, since we honor you tonight for being that kind of person?
Yes.
And the kind of international work that you've done. People don't know how all this international work, and you were doing that a long time ago, going visit Africa and South Africa. I mean, this is amazing. So, how did it come about? You got to be a judge.
Well, we had a governor named Rudy Perpich. The governor appoints the judges. So we had a governor elected by the name of Rudy Perpich. And at that time, there was one Black man who was a judge, William Poston. And probably 40 judges and just one black man and I think one white woman. And so Rudy Perpich decided he wanted the judges to look like the population. He was an immigrant himself. They made fun of him on the Iron Range, made fun of his, his food, his everything. So he knew that he wanted to equalize the playing field. And so there were two of us. The first black judge came from South Minneapolis, went to Sabathani, went to Augsburg, went to the University of Minnesota, graduated a year before I did. Her name was Pamela Alexander. And as I shared with you before, she did such a beautiful job as a groundbreaker that when I talked to my boss, Bill Kennedy, and he asked me to apply to be a judge, I applied and I was supported. There was a 2.5-year space between the appointment of Judge Alexander and the appointment of myself. And so that gave me 7.5 years of trial lawyer experience before I became a judge. And so I was appointed by the governor, and to be appointed a judge, you have to pass a background check. You have to, they go through your taxes, they go through everything. And then there's a judicial selection committee that looks at your qualifications. And usually it's like 2 or 3 finalists are recommended to the governor. So basically it's kind of like, Hamilton, it's in the room where it happened. So to be a judge, you have to have your advocate as the last person in the room with the governor. And I was fortunate to have a very, very formidable friend to be the last person in the room and get appointed to the bench. And so then once you're appointed, 18 months after that, you stand for election. And so I think you've heard about my work with the fire department and the lawsuits. So I had the son of the fire chief oppose me for election 18 months after I was elected. He had such a bad reputation that the entire Bar Association and all my allies supported me. So I was running for election with a baby on my arm, and they're like, oh, I've heard of politicians with babies, but I've never heard of a politician with their own baby. It was kind of unheard of for a judge to have a child and be on the campaign trail, but that's what was required. So it's called running scared. You have to do a very tough campaign and master support from many different places. So I had the support of women, I had the support of ethnic men and unions, and I had the support of the Black community. And so I was elected for the 6-year term, and whenever there was anyone, I think twice thereafter during the 21 years, I had an opponent, and God brought me through each time. And then I was able to take what's called an early retirement based on my years as a public defender and the years on the bench to retire early so that I could spend time with my kids going to college and make those college trips and visits and all the other things. Now, I'll just briefly say the travel. I was sitting in my chambers and I received a phone call, and it was a woman from the U.S. State Department. This was, I think, 1992. And she wanted me to speak in Europe for Black History Month. And, I have no filter. I'm like, they have Black History Month in Europe? And she said, yes. In Norway and Germany, they have Black History Month. And then I said, why are you calling me? Because it's February and cold? And she said, yes, you're from Minnesota. You're used to the cold. I'm like, okay, I got my foot in the door. I'm going to accept. And I said, I'd love to do it, but I don't even have a passport. And it was literally like a scene out of Cinderella where she laughed and said, everything will be taken care of. And so that's how I got my foot in the door, speaking as an expert for the U.S. State Department, traveling around the world with limousine drivers and staying in embassies and lecturing at universities. And basically, the International Leadership Institute started because of my State Department work. And the State Department only allowed you to be at a location for 3 weeks. And many of the problems that they wanted me to address, like domestic violence and changing laws for women, were decades-long projects. So I asked this woman at the Kenya embassy who liked my work, I said, can I start a nonprofit and continue these efforts in a nonprofit? So in 1994, we started the International Leadership Institute to address these long-term problems that we had identified and been invited to work on.
Wow. So yeah, so you, how many countries have you actually visited in Africa, should I say?
Reverend, I don't even count, but it's at least 15. I don't even count, but I've been to Egypt and Malawi and Botswana, all these different places. Just really blessed, really blessed.
Well, one of my on my list, I want before I just leave this earth on my bucket list. I don't know if you've been to Ethiopia, but at some point.
Yes, I've been there several times, but I haven't been to the churches, the Lalibela churches that are the ancient Christian churches.
I have a minister there now that's in Ethiopia, and
yes,
as a matter of fact, he asked me to come, and he's one of my young ministers that came up under me when I was in Mississippi, and how he ended up in Ethiopia, I don't know, but that he's there, and he's a youth pastor in Ethiopia during this time, and with the war and everything going on, and it's kind of crazy right now. But when all that settled down,
yes,
sit down and have a little conversation about going, and even going to Rwanda as well, because I still want to fulfill that dream. So,
yes.
So before it all checks out, you know, I would love for you to do that. So,
yeah, that would be an honor for us to travel to Ethiopia and see the early Christian churches and speak to some of those people who carried on the word for so long.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is we have a series of questions because I was thinking about this naming a bunch of women and let us honor them and go through those women of history, because I did a lot of reading and I found out a lot, including how much they impacted social justice. I mean, they had a great impact on the church, number one, even though there was a lot of sexism in the church and they weren't allowed to speak in certain churches, but they still had a tremendous impact in the church and in social justice. I mean, I didn't realize the number of women who was even involved, even around Dr. King that did the work, and how maybe his I Have a Dream speech would not have come to fruition if it had not been for a woman making a talk one night, praying a prayer. And Reverend Warnock, he the one that brought that up and told us that there are so many Black women out there who did not get the necessary recognition that they deserve. So that's why I really wanted to honor them. But our time is not going to be allowing us to go that far. So what I'm going to do, there is a series of questions we want to ask. And what I'm going to do is, and you can elaborate on some of those others as you go through these questions. I'm going to actually turn it over to Disha and let her kind of narrate now. And I'm going to ease in here and get ready to do what I need to do. Because I'm the first one up. So
it's your church.
It's my church, right? I'm still the pastor. I don't care who he is, but yeah, but they got the press over now want to talk to me. So, but the bottom line, thank you for doing this tonight, and Disha, take it on.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Judge Lange. You know, I appreciate you. I have learned so much just being around you, just sitting and just listening. I'm always like this when you speak because I want to take it all in. And you have also taken me on your travels as well. And that has been so mind changing. It's been very transformative. And so thank you for that. I have grown so much from that. And you mentioned a lot of powerful women, including your mom, which, yes, mom, I was able to meet mom too. And she was a very beautiful spirit, beautiful. And I would also like for you to mention the women that you have been up under as well. Like, who was your mentor? Who was your network? I know you introduced me to, I haven't physically met her, but I've been a fan of her work with the Children Defense Fund. And so if you want to talk about Miss Miriam, please.
Yes, Marion Wright Edelman is a lawyer by training. And when she was a lawyer, she chose to work in Mississippi because of all the inequality. And she was bold enough to speak to Robert Kennedy, the son of the president, and convince him to come to Mississippi to see the conditions for himself. And she took that opportunity to have a voice and be listened to by the White House and form the Children's Defense Fund so she could have an organization that continued the work and expanded on the work in terms of representing underrepresented and oppressed children. And so she was able to do that and have the ear of every president after President Kennedy. And she also had the ear and helped get President Bill Clinton elected and kept the children's agenda in front of Clinton and the Congress to expand treatment programs, reduce the prison to, the cradle to prison pipeline. That has been one of the things that she has been working on for a long time. Health issues, the whole welfare system and ripping our children into foster care. So all those things that affect our survival and our thriving and us being healthy, she's been working on. The Children's Defense Fund owns their own building in Washington, D.C. They have branches across the country. They operate the Freedom School, but you don't often see Marion on television or out in public. She is leading from the rear. And so one of the things she explained to me, I signed up for a workshop where they had all the Black women judges from across the United States meet at Alex Haley's farm in Tennessee. She bought the farm. So she had Hillary Clinton send the White House chef down to cook our meals, and we stayed in these remodeled or modern cabins that were to represent the slave quarters, and were able to gather and have instruction, encouragement, leadership, understanding ways of dealing with the media, scientific things that only corporate CEOs received in terms of shaping public opinion and all those kind of things, having those classes. And the haters went crazy. When they found out I was down in Tennessee, they were attacking me for time off. They were attacking, the program. And fortunately, God was there and kept them, off me. And so that has been the first time I met her. I was attending a program, and she invited us to her house. And I had my mother and daughter with me, and they were all welcome. You know, some people, they're like, oh no, you can't bring your child and your mother, it's just you. But she was like, no. And so she talked about how she would host dinners. She had redone her basement, dug it out so it was a banquet hall, so she could have meetings with Clinton and influence people in her house without the public being able to barge in and take pictures. So I learned how to be discreet and how to move an agenda where you didn't need to be quoted in the newspaper. So I learned that from her and her work, and still follow the work that she does, and you know, through her newsletter. The other people I had the privilege to meet, I was in the National Women Judges Association, because one of the things you need to do in any profession is to become a member of a national organization, because there's too many haters locally. So you can only rise so far with local organizations, but with national, there's a lot more flexibility and a lot more space and a lot more people who are willing to give you tips. And so I was at this National Women Judges meeting, and across from the hotel, I saw another hotel with a sign, and it said luncheon with Betty Shabazz, Dr. King's wife, and the lady who sat on the bus. They were all going to be at the same luncheon, and I just went crazy. I bought 3 tickets, ran over to my mom who was watching my daughter and said, can you believe they're all going to be at the same luncheon in Washington, D.C.? So we went over there and were able to shake hands and talk to all 3 of them at this luncheon. It was like, you know, you had to pinch yourself to believe that this was happening. And just to see 3 dignified, calm women. None of them were loud. They were just focused women who saw something that needed to be done and did it. They didn't have an entourage. They were just people. And so that was another lesson in terms of who is really doing something and who's fluttering around. And so it was a good exposure, but only by going nationally did I have that opportunity.
And you touched on one of my questions, and how important it is to network. What advice do you have for women looking to grow? You said national, look for national.
Yes, and that will lead me back to what you asked, who was my mentor? And one of those people was a woman by the name of Nellie Stone Johnson. Nellie Stone Johnson was a leader in politics. She also had run for elective office, and she knew how to talk to senators and governors, and she later on ended up on the Democratic National Committee from Minnesota. But she knew that as a female, there was a different route to get to where you needed to go. So Nellie was the person that I talked to most and got support from. And she had a dress shop in downtown, at least a shirt shop in downtown Minneapolis on the Nicollet Ball. So she was also a businesswoman. She also knew how to buy stock. She knew about finances so she could be independent. And she knew her politics. So Nellie was one of those people who was very influential in terms of helping. My boss, Bill Kennedy, was very helpful throughout my career in terms of encouraging me to apply for the judgeship, supporting me as the, first Black woman public defender, and getting trial assignments and felony assignments when that wasn't common for women to have, let alone Black women. And so when I had my first trial, I had some old timers in the public defender's office, and they looked at me and said, "Tell them it's your first trial." Because they knew the pressure. By the time I had boogers and snot coming out of my nose pleading my client's case. And my client was found not guilty, but it was such a pressure thing that I was crying doing my closing argument. So I learned with time not to cry. But I was glad they gave me that advice for them to tell me it was my first case. So you get over your jitters and you get over your nerves with preparation and repetition. But it's not that they never happen. It's just that you are able to work it out with preparation and repetition.
I totally agree with that. What
May I say here that that's such a great point, Judge. We all have a passion. I think most of us have a passion for something. And in order to improve on that passion and get it down pat is repetition. It's just doing it, and get used to doing it. And that's how we perfect it. Got that passion. That passion has to grow. Make sure it's of God, of course. And then grow that passion by just getting out there and doing it. And just hang on to the hands of someone with wisdom, like you tell us, with wisdom, who can carry us and lead us on a wise pathway in order to keep developing and keep increasing and in the way of the Lord, I say. And we can't go wrong that way. And God, I believe God will lead us to that person of wisdom, especially with that passion. You've gone before him with that passion and you want it to grow and you want to exercise it. And especially if it's looking out for other people and not just yourself. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I learned that there was a false humility, that thinking other people are better is false, that God gave us a unique talent and we can't reject that. We have to accept what God has given us and work with it, just like the parable of the talents. And so when God gives you something, he expects you to work with it. I learned a hard lesson when I was about 7. I ran for office at school and didn't vote for myself. I thought that was arrogant. So of course I lost by 1 vote, my own. And so I learned, as the saying goes, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? So you learn that if you enter into something, believe in yourself and step forward with the talents that God has given you. And when God hands you an opportunity, that he wants you to have it and you go forward with it. And so the Bible is full of God saying, if you don't do it, I'm going to find somebody else. And so God gives you that opportunity. And when those opportunities come and you're not sure where it's going, but the God says, just like when I got the phone call, I could have passed and said, no, I don't want to go to Norway in February. But I'm like, no, this is an opportunity that God is bringing my way. And when I said yes, then the rest of the opportunity came out that I'd be staying with the ambassador at her residence. They'd be having dinners in my honor. I'd come down the winding staircase in a ball gown, all those things, but they only showed that after I'd said yes. So it's a matter of being able to, when God brings something, understand God's not going to show you the entire picture, but he's going to point to the opportunity, and you have to step forward saying yes.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that story, especially the one about your first trial, because knowing you now, of course, I didn't know you then, but knowing in my mind, I'm thinking you have always been perfect. So
No, no, no.
so, but that brings me to the question about how do you balance your career? You touched on some of this in one of your stories. How do you balance your career, personal life, and passion? And if that is even such a thing?
Well, I think one of the things is admitting that you can't do it all by yourself. And so one of the things I learned from my African peers was to have domestic help. I mean, they thought I was ridiculous trying to be a professional and have children without live-in help. And so, you know, because you're a judge, you've got an assignment, just like you see Judge Cahill. Can you imagine the babysitter not showing up and you've got a courtroom full of people? And so, you know, a few times of bringing the baby to the courthouse is like, no, I'm going to have to get live-in help. And so I got somebody who looked like a wide receiver, a quarter back from the backfield, looked no nonsense. And I, you know, paid the lawyers to do it properly and got the person here and helped her buy a house after she left us. But it was the thing that I needed to have, that stability of somebody to cook and clean and watch, help with the kids while I was at work. So it's impossible to try to race to the childcare by 5 o'clock when you have a job that any emergency can come up and keep you at your desk. So that was the route that I had to go because I didn't have family. My mother had some health issues, so she could be an intermediate, but she couldn't be full-time. So getting that help made all the difference in terms of what I was able to do and stability. And then the other thing I had by sending the kids to Breck, and I'm sure they do it at all schools now, is we had a bus service so that if I needed to stay later, something was happening where I needed the kids to go to my mom's house, I could send the bus to my mom's house rather than my house, where the kids could arrive at her house for an activity or to stay. So that was the other thing that was very important, was those transportation issues as well as the day-to-day.
Sounds like that village mentality.
Yeah, you need. Our ancestors have always used the village. They've never worked alone or with strangers in terms of care. And so the family, the helpers, we need that, and we need to retain it, you know, all of our lives.
Yeah, I appreciate, you know, my mom, she's, you know, one of those overprotective moms, and she didn't let me go anywhere, which was okay with me. Especially growing up and looking back on it, I'm like, you know what? I appreciate my mom for being that way. But she was so particular about who she placed me around as well, and who she did let be in our company and all of that. My aunts, from my mom and dad's side, I have learned so much from them. I think I got some of my grandmother, my mother, who my dad was talking about. I think I got a lot of her in me because I spent a lot of time with her. I've learned a lot of different skills from the women that I have been surrounded by. My first plane ride was to Chicago to visit a friend, one of the women my mom was friends with, and I learned how to cook a mean lasagna from that lady. So I really appreciate all of the women that have empowered me. And so the last question I have for you is, what happens when you empower a girl?
Well, first I need to speak to how you were raised. I was not allowed to babysit in anybody's house. And it was a source of money. I'm like, why? And finally she said, tell them if they want you to babysit, bring the child over to our house. If it's just about babysitting, drop them off. And so what really came out as to why she said that is that so many men, first of all, they're going out and they're drinking in the first place. That's why they want the babysitter. Then you're alone with that man who's been drinking, and things can happen. So my mother finally told me that's why she didn't want me going to people's houses to babysit. And one of the babysitters in our church, she ended up with somebody very important dying of a heart attack while he was abusing her. So you saw in living color these kind of things. So a lot of times the protection is because there is a clear and present danger at the adult level. And they're not trying to traumatize us or have us gossip about Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so. So there are rules that are set, but they're designed to protect us. When I lived by myself, because my mother had, put this, be careful who you associate with, I had my own house, and suddenly there's a banging on my front door. And I'm like, I didn't invite anybody over. And it was a important Black banker who had helped me get a grant knocking on my door on a Saturday morning. So I'm like, I didn't invite this man over. And the way he was knocking on the door, it was like the big bad wolf. So I had a little house, but I said, I'm gonna pretend I am invisible and I'm not opening the door. And so a lot of times there are people who you see in one way, but there's really another agenda that they have. So the protection that you're raised under is to protect you from those people who are careful to put that mask on and who can deceive you as a child or a young person. And so the Lord told me, do not open the door. And he saved me from that person. But it's that kind of situation that you put this air of protection. So there were no sleepovers. I never slept over at anybody's house. There were certain people that I could only visit if their mother was home. If they were home with their dad, I couldn't go to their house. So those were the narrow ways, because of what my mom had observed and heard, how we were able to enter into relationships with people. Mm-hmm. And so it makes you different. Mm-hmm. But you're not as scarred and traumatized as,
I'm okay.
because because I told somebody about the banker recently, and they're like, "Yeah, I know who that is." So it was like, "Uh-oh, he was running through the community."
Oh, see?
Mhm,
I'm okay,
mhm,
big different.
Can I
mhm.
speak on that too? There's Lajune. My mom was like that too because my dad was a farmer, and we used to go sell oranges and the produce to the neighborhood, and we had our regular customers. But my mom always sent us two at a time to the house, and she said, "Don't you ever go in the house." She said, "Stay at the door, and if they want whatever they want, they could just hand you the money, and then you hand them the product." They said, "Don't you ever go in the house." And we had a next door neighbor too. He always come to our yard, and my mom would send us over there, and she said, "Don't go in the house." She said, "Stand right there, and I'm gonna stand right here and see you go over there. And all you gotta do is just reach your hand, and he's gonna reach back, and you come right back over here." So I would always say, my mom and my dad, they were so protective of us growing up, and now I understand why they did that. But I just want to say I've been missing, some of the series, but I wanted to ask you, maybe you've mentioned this before, what prompted you on your first trip to the continent?
Mm.
I was a judge. I had been to, as I shared with you, Norway and Germany, and there was a African visitor because of my links with the State Department, an African lawyer. They sent her to see me at the government center. And I told her about my experience and what I'd been doing and working, and she said, "If I invite you to Africa, will you come?" And I thought, oh, how sad. Have other people, she invited other people and they didn't show up, but I just kept that inside my head and I said yes. And so in less than 6 months, I was in Kenya. This woman's name is Jean Kamal. She was an attorney with FIDA Kenya, and she wanted help to introduce a law to protect women from domestic violence. It took us about 8 years, step by step by step, to educate the public, to get the politicians, to get the laws passed, to do the training. And we were able to get it done. She had a big organization in Kenya that did the legwork. And I served as kind of the tip of the spear when the political obstacles became too tough. Then I came over to push the politicians because they couldn't threaten my livelihood the way they could threaten her. So we also got her involved with ILI, and we gave her a big award, and we sent the award to the Kenya embassy. So a whole lot of stuff is about perception. So when they received this award sent to the embassy, then they had to send it back to Kenya in the diplomatic pouch. So all of a sudden, really, really important. So it's like, who is this that the diplomatic service is giving this award to, sent from America? So that just helped validate all the work that Jean was doing, and she became involved with the Foreign Service in Kenya and now serves as an ambassador. So it's she has come multiple times to the U.S. and I visited her and her son in Kenya, and it's just that kind of support and network.
Well, I just want to say again, because of you saying yes to your first international speaking engagement, because of that long time ago, I have been able to connect with people and students internationally. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes. And the other thing is saying yes when you don't have all the talents. Disha, I don't have all the talents that you have. So every time I get with a group of Black women or get to one of these things, they want to have a talent show. Well, I can't sing. So I had to learn to recite poetry or do something to keep from being embarrassed. So just be thankful the Lord has endowed you with so many different talents.
Thank you,
And
God.
whatever you have, you make the best. So I learned to recite, everything from Dunbar to Shakespeare so that I could do what I needed to do.
And scriptures does do scriptures.
Yes, yes.
Well, it's been an hour. I mean, like, this is Conversations with Pearls of Living and Judge Lajune Lange. And we thank everyone for listening in. And we look forward to more conversations. If you have any questions or suggestions, you could, what is it? info@pearlsofliving.com. We would love to hear your suggestions and feedback on our conversation series. But this was a wonderful way to honor our women.
Yes.
Amen.
We all have a place in history. We all have these, as women, is who we're honoring tonight. And what footprint, my question is, and for you to ponder is, what kind of footprint are we making to leave for as a history and for others to follow? So what footprint are we making?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that concludes tonight. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night. We're joining the prayer visual now.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Judge Lajune.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Sister
Thank you.
Deetra. Thank you, First Lady.
Hey,
Thank you, Pearls of
Emery.
Living.
Thank you, Emery.
Thanks, Sister Julia.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a blessed night, Judge.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.